For Static and NewsOK.com, I'm George Lang. The death of Philip Seymour Hoffman on Sunday at age 46 came as a shock to both the entertainment industry and the fans who came to admire his singular talent. In 1995, long before he won the Best Actor Oscar for his work on Capote, Hoffman was a member of the cast of Twister, which was filmed here in Oklahoma. With me today is Daryl Cox, a Norman-based actor who had a small role in Twister and has appeared in To the Wonder, Friday Night Lights, and other Texas and Oklahoma productions, and our own Heather Warlick, who worked as a stand-in photo double and stunt double for Jamie Gertz on the set of Twister. Daryl, Heather, thank you for coming. First of all, Daryl, tell me a little bit about what some of your experiences were with Philip Seymour Hoffman on the set of Twister.
Well, it's funny, when he died, I didn't talk about this a lot, but for some reason when he died, I thought maybe now that I'd gotten some perspective on it, I should maybe, bring this out as much as anything else that's being talked about with him. Mm-hmm. Because, normally when someone dies, all you hear are how wonderful they were and how perfect they were. And they're human beings like everybody else, and they have their ups and downs. Mm-hmm. So when I worked with him on Twister in '95, most of the set was very friendly. A lot of the actors were very easy to get along with, very friendly, very accessible. And to be honest with you, Philip was not. He was very closed off, very standoffish.
And in what way? How did this come across?
Well, I mean, when I'd be on the set with him, he basically was one of the only ones that wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't come near me.
Breeze past you.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Kind of not make eye contact, which mm-hmm. was a bit odd, I thought. Wasn't the only one, but mm-hmm. he kind of stood out. And some people talk about, well, maybe he was shy. Well, he wasn't shy. Yeah. That's not true.
Well, now you posted this in a Facebook post, which I thought was really thoughtful and said a lot about. It had a lot of insight into the condition of the actor. You said that he got into a fight on the set with Bill Paxton, correct?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, apparently, and I didn't actually see what happened beforehand. I did see the fight, mm-hmm. but apparently Paxton felt that Hoffman was trying to steal a scene. Mm. And so they got into it. First it was an argument, and then it developed into a fight, and Jan de Bont, the director, actually had to get between them to stop the fight.
Yeah, yeah. But beyond just thinking of, well, this is a person who doesn't play well with others, you came over the years based on the things that happened to him in his career and how he responded to his continued success, gave you a little bit of insight into maybe where he was at that point in 1995.
Well, he was a very unhappy man, it seemed to me, on Twister, and I thought, well, you should be glad to be where you are. But then about 10 years later, I talked to Austin Pendleton's very well-respected New York actor and director, and we had this good conversation about him, and suddenly he told me that when Philip Seymour Hoffman first hit the scene in New York City, he made such a splash, he was so impressive. Everyone was just head over heels in love with this guy. He was such a talent. And they said, and this is what Austin said to me, they considered him the next Brando.
Wow.
Now here he is, he's 22, 23 years old, he's in New York City, and he's the next Brando, right? He's gonna be the next Brando. And then 5 years later, he's playing this second tier, not very in-depth character in a film that's really all about the special effects, not about the characters.
He's Dusty the Weather Chaser.
He's Dusty the Weather Chaser, and you have to think, and when Austin said that to me, it just suddenly clicked in my head, what must it have been like for him to have all this hoopla, all this, potential that everyone was talking about, and there he was working on this film, feeling maybe like a bit of a fool that he was supposed to be such the great actor, and instead he was doing this. Mm-hmm. And when I saw him, it wasn't long after that, when I saw him accept the Oscar for Capote, it struck me the way he went up to the stage to accept the Oscar and what he said at the Oscar, it suddenly struck me, oh my God, here's a guy 10 years later. He knows what he's like on a set. He knows what it must have seemed like to some of the people working with him. And maybe I projected a little bit, but I felt there was a little bit of an apology and certainly an obvious humility to the way he accepted that award that I think had something to do with the fact that he knew in his earlier days when he was struggling, when he was frustrated, when he felt like things weren't going to happen for him, that maybe he regretted that he didn't treat people as well as he wished he had. Right. And some of the things I've been hearing, including from you, he may have gone about rectifying that kind of attitude, trying to be nicer to people in his work. And certainly, if you look at his work in the 90s, in the early 90s, and you look at what he became and how he grew as an actor, you certainly have to consider, well, couldn't he have grown as a person too? Couldn't he have, matured as a human being?
Right. Developed some perspective on where his place was and how he related to both to fame, to work, and to the people around him.
Well, as he himself said, acting is not as easy as it looks. Matter of fact, it's supposed to look easy, but in fact, it's incredibly difficult. And from everything I've read, and now that I realize what I was seeing on that set, this is a man who agonized over his work, who really tried to do his best and agonized over how well he was doing, whether he was doing a good enough job. And I think that struggle for him was lifelong, but as he matured, he just started to realize it's my problem, doesn't have to be everyone else's problem.
Now, Heather, first of all, tell me about how you became part of Twister, because that's kind of amazing to me. Not that you wouldn't have talent to do it, it's just kind of an amazing thing that to get a job on a major production like that.
Oh, it was kind of, I don't know, to make a long story short, I guess, I went into the talent agency instead of going to the cattle call and waiting in line, and they took a Polaroid of me, and somehow I got a call saying they were interested in me as the double for Jamie Gertz. Mm-hmm. I got to the set in Ponca City. It was towards the very beginning of filming, and Jamie Gertz's hair was pretty long, and mine was a little bit too short and too red. I had the Friends style at the time, and so I didn't think I got the job. And I got a call a few days later, and they said, "You got the job." Went back to the set, and they had cut Jamie's hair in the same style as I had going on. So I was like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. Right. So that's how I got the job, and I worked in Ponca City for 6 weeks. Lived up there in a little duplex with some of the other doubles and extras and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. But I have kind of a different impression of what I went away with from Philip Seymour Hoffman.
You caught him on different days?
Maybe it was because it was the beginning of filming. Maybe there hadn't been too much strife built up or something. But that was a very good introspective analysis of him, and I didn't, think of it in quite those terms. I saw him as a little bit moody sometimes, but I also saw him and some of his co-actors really kind of cutting up and just being goofballs. We played board games together sometimes, just sitting around, and they didn't have doubles for those characters. So, us doubles for the lead characters, we would hang out with them, when we were doing shooting and stuff. Sometimes I was in the car driving with him in some of the shots, and I don't know, I got kind of a good impression. I thought he was really nice. I thought he was really talented. I did see what you were mentioning is that maybe he felt like this role wasn't quite up to what he envisioned for himself, but it was so early in his career that maybe maybe he hadn't really set that vision for what he later became.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, obviously on a set, what I always hear is that there's a whole lot of like hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
That you spend a lot of downtime just waiting for things to be set up.
Right.
And so that does give you an opportunity to kind of to get to know these people a little bit better. Did you have any kind of insight that this was a man who was going to go on to really extraordinary things?
You know, that's a good question. He always really stood out somehow. You know, he's just one of those people that when he walks into a room that you really like, you notice him. Not because he's so great looking, but he just has a magnetism about him. And so I would say yes and no. I mean, I followed his career with a real interest because, you know, I kind of sort of knew him, and it always amazed me, you know, how far he went and the types of roles that he took on, especially knowing him from this frivolous character, Dusty. You know, that was in my impression of him, how I knew him. And so, yes, I saw greatness, but he actually went above and beyond what I could have imagined.
Right, right. Well, I mean, just a few years later, he's appearing in Boogie Nights and Magnolia and Happiness and all of these, and Punch Drunk Love, and just giving some really extraordinary performances, and of course culminating in his Oscar win for Capote. And it's just, and to you guys, I mean, it seems like this is one of those actors who wasn't necessarily, he wasn't a type. You can't just sort of like plug and play, put somebody into a role that Philip Seymour Hoffman was in. He was pretty unique, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was not, he talked about it himself, he's not a leading man. He was not handsome. He knew that he wasn't going to make it that way with his looks, but I don't think he ever seemed to look at it in that way, that it was about looks. I mean, perhaps he was forced by his looks to approach it more seriously, but I think he just simply was a serious actor who really treated it as a craft that you wanted to do your best at and accomplish as much as possible with it. And whether he became a big star or not, I don't think that was his primary goal. I think his goal was just to do the best work he could possibly do in the best projects he could possibly find. So.
Great. Well, listen, thank you, both of you, for coming in and talking about this. It's sad news, but you've helped give us some perspective on it. And for more information on Philip Seymour Hoffman and some of the roles that he was working on, some of the projects that are now in sort of a state of flux because of his untimely passing, please go to newsokada.com for all that information. I'm George Lang.